Hello, everyone. Welcome to Calling All Unicorns, our monthly show where we explore how creativity is good for business. I'm Vun. I'm your host, along with Janine Lepford and Abigail Jones. Now, Abigail is not with us today because she's out on one of her outdoor leadership adventures. And so it's just going to be myself and Janine interviewing Zach, who I'll introduce in just a minute. So Janine and I will first briefly introduce ourselves, and then I will introduce you to this month's guest, Zach Wardes. So I am Vun. I'm the founder of WorkSmart, where we do team and leadership development all through the lens of what I call creative integration, which basically means we do everything through creativity, play, and shared experiences. Janine.
Hey, I am Janine, your intercultural creativity facilitator and keynote speaker. We look at inclusion and diversity, equity, and inclusion, but also the creative intersection of it. And so how can we develop your people, your teams, and you with that creative thinking, but also be inclusive as well. So happy to be here and so excited about our guest today, because I'm all about people.
I know, all about creative people too. Okay, so Zach, I know before we went live, you asked very politely how you pronounce Janine's name and my name, and I did not ask you how you pronounce your last name. Can you tell me how we do that?
Yeah, sure, of course. It's Wordies.
Wordies. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So with that, so our guest this month is Zach Wordies. He is Senior Manager of People Development at PagerDuty, where he develops programs that creates a culture of learning. So Zach draws from his experience in people development, in education, entrepreneurship, sales, recruiting, coaching, and even lifeguarding to positively impact the communities and people around him. So I met Zach through a LinkedIn post from our mutual friend, Haley Sestak, who is now Director of Employee Experience at Brick and the former co-host of Calling All Unicorns. And she had made a post, I would say now about a year and a half ago, Zach, listing people in her network who she suggested should know each other. And both Zach and I were on that list. And we took her up on her suggestion and connected. And here we are now. So welcome to Calling All Unicorns, Zach.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah. And I actually, interestingly enough, yesterday, Haley reached out to me on something completely separate. I'm like, oh my gosh, would you be available to come and surprise Zach on the show? And unfortunately, she wanted to, but she had a team meeting right at the same time. So, but Janine, we should add that into our runner show, just like have surprise guests come.
You don't know, but behind door number 3.
Exactly. All right, so Zach, Calling All Unicorns is about highlighting people who are doing things differently in their industries. I mentioned in the introduction that the various experiences you've had to get to your current role. So tell us a little bit about how you got to your role at PagerDuty and how you found yourself in people development.
Yeah, thanks for that call out. And I, by the way, loved connecting. It's been great to get to know folks, and I love just the ethos of the posts that connected us. So these are great folks. So, getting to PagerDuty for me was really momentous. To just call that out, I was unemployed at the time and had gone through a bit of a rough spot from a personal and family perspective, and like a lot of unemployed people, was out there applying and really grinding and doing everything I could and made it my full-time job. And so, to directly answer your question, I found my way to PagerDuty through their job site. I think I saw it on Indeed and applied. But obviously the bigger story to that, is that I found a great manager and a role that fit with my experience. And I chose this position because of the connection that I found with my manager and the teammates there through the interviewing, and that to me is also a side note. Some of my main advice for all job seekers is, if you can, to pick a manager. I realize we don't all have that flexibility in our lives, but if you have that, that's the way to go. I think it leads to a lot of success. But the other part of your question, how I got into people development, I've spent a lot of years, you called it, doing a lot of different things and trying to figure out who I was and what that meant. And I was experimenting, right? And I ended up in education. And that led me to get a master's degree, which exposed me to all sorts of ideas and models and research that really got me excited about human resources management. After trying entrepreneurship and then recruiting, I eventually realized that I was really passionate about people development. And so I sort of pushed my way into a role at the company I was already working for at the time. I was doing recruiting, and I kept poking and prodding until I was fortunate enough that they let me or chose me, I should say, to do people development. And that's been the other key throughout my career, is having leaders who support me and believe in me and listen to what I want and help me to get there. And that's been a big part of me finding this journey to people development.
That's great. I like that story, because you didn't like graduate from college, like I'm going into people development, right? You had this interest, this curiosity, and you just took these small steps and followed that curiosity. And like you said, had people who supported you in it. I am curious though, like this idea of creativity is about connecting things that normally don't connect. So I'm curious, like I listed a bunch of things that you had done previously, like the lifeguarding, the education. Yeah. How did some of the skills or tools that you gained from some of your past experience help you in the career you're in now?
Yeah, definitely. So I think a lot of my skills were formed early and through a variety of experiences, and sort of like a lot of us, it came out of the lens of how I saw myself, and so there's tons of, research and theories about how we view ourselves. But for me, I always, I was constantly in sports, and to me, sports was everything. And through college, which, for better or worse, was how I sort of approached it. But I learned a lot of things about dedication that I'm just now starting to pick up, and realize that I have as part of me. And I think that's been sort of the biggest learnings that I've realized have been the subconscious, unconscious ones, where I've sort of figured out that I am able to work through a lot of adverse conditions. I can, show up when my family's not doing well, when I'm emotionally not doing well, and I can still get good work done. And that's an important thing to learn. I didn't really know that about myself until the past few years, and so having all these experiences and different experiences in different roles, it really helped me to engage with humans, to learn different aspects of humanity. And more than anything, I think what it revealed for me was that what I called out my passion. Like I worked, one of the things I don't know if it was mentioned, maybe it was, worked in the service industry for a while. And I worked as, I was the doorman at a popular nightclub in San Diego. And it was stressful. And I had to learn a lot really quickly about confrontation and dealing with humans and dealing with intoxicated humans and, managing that whole thing. And that just gave me a whole new perspective and appreciation for patients and what other people are going through, and, how to engage with different individuals in tense situations. So I think throughout my career, I've picked up a lot of instances like that, but there's been this constant theme that I've now been able to see through these different adventures, as we'll call them, where it's constantly taking me back to a love for understanding others and for engaging with other people. And I don't know if I consider myself an extrovert, but I definitely love to know and think about what other people are going through and share some of that myself.
There's a lot there that I can pick apart. You don't know too much about my background, I don't think, unless you kind of scaled through my LinkedIn. But as you see, I do have a brain. A lot of the work that I'm doing and some of the work that Vaughn and I are doing together is really looking at the neuroscience behind creativity, but also with the inclusion aspect as well. And you talking about just you being security, the head door person, right? And your ability to have to perspective shift and see the environmental cues and the different elements that go into handling people and how you're able to transfer. I think a lot of people need to hear that your ability to transfer what you know then to a new environment now is key. How do you then transfer those type of skills that you just had on these various jobs? And it seems like you're high in your ability to, we call it like you're culturally competent. You're able to see similarities and differences within people and different lived experiences, but you have that within you. How do you position yourself as an educator to teach that to those who you're training up now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Janine. I would say for me, I'm still, I'd say I'm new on this journey of being in a leadership role. I think I've always been a leader. I think everyone can be leaders. And I think that's, something that I've definitely taken in and tried to, enact. But so I feel like I've always been acting as a leader, but now I'm actually in the leadership role. And so for me, a lot of what I've done in the past has been modeling that behavior through, by example, right? And taking it far back when I first started on my leadership journey, it was through sports. I was a vocal kid. I was willing to give people my opinion. My coaches liked that. So I found leadership roles on teams, and I was willing, to talk to my teammates. And I had good connections and relationships. And that was very directive. And I didn't understand some of the nuances of leading others and how to really, get to their heart as opposed to just their mind. And so as I've been on this journey, it's been this transformation of trying to not just direct and not just show by example, which to me has also been a journey. And I think is actually super critical, right? Being vulnerable, being willing to show, let people know that you see different sides of yourself and that you have complexities, what that complexity is. Let them know that your emotions vary and sort of where they are. I think I've surprised some of my teammates in the past few months when I've let them know that like I'm really having a down week or my head's really out of it. I'm sorry if I, am aloof. It's not you, and to me that's a really key part of leadership. And so the journey that I'm getting on now and also trying to go is that coaching journey. Because I think that's, to me, there's so much power that I've found through therapy and through coaching, where others are asking you questions and they're trying to help you, and they're not putting expectations on you, right? But they're trying to help you see whatever it is that you need to see, that maybe you're not seeing, without telling you, look at that, and that's really hard to do. That's the trick that I'm still trying to learn, but I think it's a really critical leadership skill that I've experienced from, my manager and the best people I've worked with.
Like the quote that says, great teachers kind of tell you where to look, but not tell you exactly what to see. And that's the beauty of perception in our brains.
I love that.
I love that you take on this perspective, and now that you're stepping into a formal leadership role, but you come from a perspective of you are always a leader, and you've always been able to see that no matter what role you're in, that you can be a leader. And for people who have official leadership roles to understand that and to know that, I think is really important, because now you can, when we first talked, we talked about this idea that it was really important for you to create this engaging work environment where people are doing things, where you're doing things differently, using creativity, giving everyone an opportunity to have their voice heard and show their leadership skills. And you have that experience. So I see where that comes from now that you're telling us this. So at PagerDuty, what are some of these things that you've put into place that allows this concept of sharing perspective, giving everyone a chance to have their voice heard, giving everyone a chance to be a leader, or feel that they have a voice, even if they're not in a leadership role?
Yeah. It's definitely it's a journey, right? And it's something that I think we're at the beginning of this journey of transforming development at PagerDuty to, something better. And maybe we're not at the beginning, we're in the midst of it is probably a better description. And, I would say that we're probably always going to be in the midst of it, because the finish line is constantly moving and changing. And that's great. It's, to me, part of what I love about this field. Just as a side note, like people development, learning and development, whatever you want to call it, like the science, the curiosity, the change, the creativity in it is so beautiful to me. And it's an awesome place to work because it's constantly shifting, and I hope that you too feel that way. I would assume that's, kind of one of the passions that you find for the work you're doing too. Because I mean, that to me is, I love science. And that's one of the reasons I love it, is because of that change and that willingness to constantly seek what's best, and knowing that that's always going to be changing. Like, I don't know, it speaks to kind of my philosophy on life. So, but to specifically answer your question, like I said, I love science. So trying to bring, personally for me, I oversee employee and team development at PagerDuty. So one member of a currently 6-member team of people development at the company. And I'm focused on how do I bring more science and research-backed models and methods of development to the business, which traditionally is not really done in business, right? There's a lot of, this is what works, this is what we've seen, this is what people want, so we're just going to do it that way. And one of the things that I really learned through my education was that the best way isn't always the easiest way. And that in education and learning is difficult for individuals, right? To accept, like, I might need to do this a harder way than I might need to learn in a way that's not just watching YouTube videos, right? Or it might not just be doing the thing, right? It may actually require multiple steps and someone correcting me and so on. So that's sort of been my focus. I would say, what we are trying to do specifically at PagerDuty in the programs was I spent the first 3 years working on and crafting and scaling onboarding and new hire experiences, which, as you can imagine, is a very big and ambiguous field. And I now have an amazing team member that's taking it to even higher heights and doing some really awesome things there. And, we feel strongly that managers are the key to effective development too. And that the managers often feel kind of too overwhelmed or don't know where to even start with crafting development plans for their teams. And so I've tried to approach my role, and this is new work for us. We're just starting to plow the field, or whatever analogy you want to use there. But we're starting to look at how do we get managers to raise their hand for help and then meet them and give them the help they're looking for, but shift their mindset and get them to see the journey that the team is on and craft a proposal for them. So I've been focusing on, getting them to fill out these intake forms, getting meetings and intake meetings with them where we assess the team. We give them a proposal for the year so that we can get them personalized development for their teams. And then we're also focusing on doing this through the lens of Tuckman's 4-stage model of team development, which a lot of people have heard of, but might not know that it's Bruce Tuckman. It's the forming, storming, norming, and performing model. Okay. Yeah. So that's Bruce Tuckman was the researcher who found it. But
got it.
So it's been a hit, and it's also been a challenge. I think people want to develop, and so managers are apt and hungry to take in this for their teams and sort of figure out how can we apply this approach. It's also been a mindset shift for a lot of them to think about that journey and to try to get them to think that it's not all about performing, right? It's not just about getting your team to performing. It's about the journey. It's about progressing. If you're at the storming stage, that's great. Who cares?
Yeah.
If you're at the norming stage, that's great too. Very few teams get to performing. So you should be focused on progressing, because you're probably going to get hit back to forming at some point. So that's one side of it has been teams, and we're trying to provide that scientific lens there, and we're sort of testing and seeing how this plays out.
I have to just pause you for a second, Zach, because every time you say the word science, I see Janine smile. she's very much in the neuroscience. So I'm just letting you know, you're really connecting with her right now.
It's awesome.
Go on.
We've got much more to talk about, because the next part is where I'm actually trying to dig in now more to the sciences. I have my model for teams, or I should say the lens that we look at team development through. And through that lens, I am researching what a longer term path will be, right, for team development. And in terms of individuals, I'm still looking for that lens. So there's a lot of different models of individual and personal development. And I've been trying to, figure out which one do we apply to that. But on the individual front, it's not just looking for a model. We still are rolling out content for them too. We've launched monthly development sections in our employee communication. So we try to put information in places where people are already looking so that they can easily learn a little bit. It doesn't always have to be huge, momentous learning. It can be, just small little tidbits, or, in that communication, I post a 4 or 5 minute interview with a Dutonian, which is what we call our employees at PagerDuty. So with a fellow Dutonian, talking about whatever the theme of that month is. That helps a little bit. And then we're also piloting and planning, and this is brand new. We haven't even announced this to the business yet. So if PagerDuty folks are listening, surprise, But we're planning some learning events, and we're planning a regional learning event that will be focused on career development, and it leaves attendees with actionable career development plans. So, figuring out the scientific model for personal development is definitely in that journey as well.
Yeah, well, like Von's called it out. This is so exciting, and it's so wonderful that you, in your position, you're becoming more aware of this. And I say that this is the decade of creativity, of culture, and of neuroscience, because neuroscience has just been an esoteric type of area. Like not too many people knew about it, but as teachers and educators and leaders, it's our job to help change their brains and help develop their brains, but we have no clue what's going on in their brains, even when it comes to creativity. That's why Von and I really connected, because, the creative interaction of the cultural interaction, and then how do we see the world and how do we see ourselves? So wonderful that you're at the helm. Small research to kind of connect to what you said at the very beginning. Carol Dweck out of Stanford, she does the growth mindset, fixed mindset work. A lot of people know that, but even from the educational position, she says that the educator or the person with authority in the room has one of the highest influences of student or team member success. That is huge. And so when you said, you got under a manager and that was a big shift, there's actually research backing that up. And so looking at your manager development, because that is one of the largest indicators of your team member success, in addition to all of the other elements as well. So you are well on your way to cracking this nut, even though it's an ongoing nut, right? And we have to look at what training looks like, because this whole like coming in for an hour in training and then that's it, like you're dealing with belief systems that have been built for over 20, 30 years, depending on how old your people are. So Von and I and Abigail and people who are in the training areas are trying to communicate to the corporations. You have to kind of extend your relationship, because you're dealing with changing belief systems, and the brain needs more time to kind of reset itself and implement better habits. So I'm so excited for what you have in store for your organization.
Thanks, Janine. Yeah, it's been interesting to see. I think there's also the challenge of the shifting, nature of work right now. Just like, where do people work and how do we consume and connect, and the feelings of disconnect that happen, and the shift that happens in how people learn when they're put behind a screen, I think is still something that we're trying to figure out. How does that play out, and how do we supplement with enough asynchronous content, but enough synchronous live content that people are feeling connected? So,
and our brains are our brains are biosocial. So you have to keep that in mind, that we have to be connected. But the stuff that Von does, like mailing creativity boxes to people, and so you have that hands-on mixed with the screen, but it's mixed with the discussion even across the screen. So just the way that she sets up her curriculum is really neuroscience based, even though she doesn't know it. I tell her I'm here to back you up with the research.
That's right.
You do you, and actually her and
I play and create, and then Janine gives me the research.
Yeah, we're doing a live together to talk about her rocks and the blocks, about how there's research that backs up. I call it assembling reminders. So when you have people assemble reminders of the concept that they learn, and it's in front of them now, like on their desk, and so they're walking around, their subconscious is hitting at it. It's reminding them of the concept that they learn. And so that's why there's not a lot of implementation of the lessons, because there's no reminders in their space. And so, like I said, Von does all the great work, and then I just come up and back her up with all the research.
We make a great team, because she's like, where'd you get that research? I'm like, what research? All right. So, Zach, since our assertion of the show is that creativity is good for business, we always ask our guests to do a creative activity. And Janine and I will be joining you in this creative activity today. And what I'm going to ask all of us to do is turn to our bookshelves and pick 5 items on your bookshelf, and we are going to play some of this amazing new music that StreamYard has for 1 minute, and we're going to build something with our 5 objects. Ready? Okay, so here we go. I'm going to start the music now. You have 1 minute to build 5 objects.
this.
All right, I think that's about a minute. I should say it's a loose minute. It's whenever I was done, you guys needed to be done.
There you go. It's all
Okay.
relative. Everything in life is relative, right?
Absolutely. Okay, so now I'm gonna, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a few questions here and just raise your hand if this applies to you. Did you build for a strong foundation? Okay. Did you build for aesthetics? You wanted to look good?
Little.
Okay. Did you build for height? Did you want to be tall? Do you want to be very tall? Yeah. Okay. So Zach was going for a tower. Okay. How about this one? Did you make it a competition in your own head, sitting by yourself in your office? Did you make it a competition?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, it happens every time. I don't know how to stop it. So, all right, great. So what we did was we just took 5 objects, gave you limited time, limited materials, and we said build something, right? Build a tower, build something. And basically, it clearly wasn't just about building something. This idea of what came up for you, right? What came up for you? I'll give you some examples for me. Is that I am competitive, so I was like, every time something would fall, I'm like, I didn't want that to fall. How do I get that to work? But then I adapted. I'm like, okay, this rock is never going to stand on this little leaf, so I'm going to adapt and put it somewhere else. The aesthetics for me, having things that look nice, have pretty colors, that's something that's very relevant in my life too. So what came up for you? I'm just going to ask you, like, what came up for you, Zach and Janine, as you were building?
Well, yeah, I'll jump in. So for me, I think there was similar to you. I felt a little bit of competitiveness. I have my little guitar thing that I balanced on the top of my Doctor Who TARDIS, and I was, like, this has to stay. I have to balance it, and it came from this place of wanting to be vulnerable. I mentioned that earlier, and I've been it's like I was so caught up in how do I show myself through these items. I was like, I need the guitar thing. I need a little bit of PagerDuty. I need something from my team. I need, some of my interest in my kids. So I have a little bit of all of that in there.
Mm-hmm. Ooh, awesome. So almost like aspects of your life is represented, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. One of the elements that I teach is metaphorical thinking and the power of that. So for me, every item that I chose had a metaphorical message as well. But then I reminded myself that I didn't have to build necessarily on top of one another. So I put my teaching award behind the other 4 objects. I said, okay, this can do, because in a building there's some things behind it and on the side of it are coming, especially if you look at the work of Frank Gehry, who did the Walt Disney Concert Hall, just like things are out of the norm or whatever. So yeah, my brain, of course, and my cube, which was the main design on my first book, Financial Freedom, Creating Financial Freedom from the Inside Out. So it's problem solving with your creativity from the inside out.
That's great. I'm going to leave my little build up. I hope you do too, because continue to look at, like you're saying, I call it creative artifact. What does it continue to tell you as it sits there? But Zach, last question for you, it pertaining to your build is, it's interesting because a lot of what you said was about you wanted things that had personal meaning to you, and that concept of vulnerability. And you mentioned that earlier about how you bring that vulnerability into the workplace. So I guess the question really is, like, the way you built that, how do you use that in the work that you do?
Yeah. I think a lot of it is, well, I think you probably saw a lot of it in this interview. I try to focus on, one of our company values is bring yourself, and it's an awesome value, and it implies showing up with your full self. That is vulnerability to me, is being willing to speak that truth at all times. So that's a constant journey for me, and that is something that I bring into my work. It's a struggle, whether I'm giving feedback to a peer or someone else, or receiving feedback, but reminding myself to let myself be my full self and acknowledging all the feelings. And I say that because I spent a lot of years not doing that. And, it comes from a place in athletics and whatever you want to add to that, I wasn't comfortable. And so, yeah, that's really something I try to channel, and I channel it in my work. It's why I show up with science, because I love it. And it is part of my core worldview, and I try to bring all of those things, all of myself to work every day. And I think sometimes it's great and sometimes it drives people nuts, but at the end of the day, it leads to good outcomes.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Zach. And definitely the way you show up here, if this is the way you show up in the workplace, I see how you are setting that example of vulnerability and bringing your whole self to work to PagerDuty. And they're lucky to have you. Okay, so the next section of this is really just to give sort of an update on like what's next. So we'll start with Janine, I'll go, and then the last word goes to you, Zach. So Janine, what is new for you? I know there's always something.
Welcome to my world. Even with a little 4-year-old, I am looking to just create this new inclusive excellence program for California State University Northridge. And I was telling Vaughn, I hope this goes really well, which I know it'll go really well. And then hopefully I'll be able to go into some other departments and bring her with me to train as well. So I just love creating new ways to get people to think about their self-awareness first, and then go out and make the team stronger.
That's great. Yes, I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. Especially, are you willing to hold up that map you?
Oh, yes. So I'm married to a graphic designer, which is a good find. Oh my goodness. And I just said, I kind of like Vaughn, I have Legos and Play-Doh and just different ways to get people to talk and see themselves in different lights. But my husband designed a roadmap, because it's CSUN's roadmap to inclusion excellence. And so we even got like little cars to metaphorically talk about their journey to inclusive excellence. And so like he's going to have the printers printed out. And it's just another challenge for me to teach in a visceral way that people can really take it with them and have change. So that's what we want, is people to have change, right? Awesome. So thanks for asking, Vaughn.
Yes, thanks, Janine. So for me, it's summer, it's my favorite season. So I've been doing, between working, I've been doing a lot of paddle boarding. There's this little, this has nothing to do with work, but there's this little place we go where we can paddleboard to a sushi restaurant and then paddle back home. So that's sort of like the latest thing in my outdoor adventure world, which Abigail will be very proud of. And as far as work, I've been in the process of thinking about doing a digital course, particularly for women in the workplace, for many years now. And that is now in the works. So it's not launched yet, but hopefully by next month, when we're on here again, that will have been launched. I can announce where you can find that. And Zach, we'll go to you for the last word on what's next for you.
Yeah, thanks, Vaughn. Thanks, Janine. I really appreciate the time and sharing some space with you both. This has been great. I would just say for me, this has been on my personal and professional docket lately, has been setting intention. And I tried to approach, as I was prepping for this, like who I was speaking to, and, sort of thinking about people who may be struggling with finding that intention or the next step or where they're going. And that was, the lens that I took for a lot of my answers. And so my last thought is just, what I've been trying to do is find intention with everything I'm doing, right? And it's been hard. It's been really hard for me to find that intention, but finding that intention, I found, allows me to more clearly set my strategy, which allows me to more clearly build programs, feel good about risk I'm taking, and so on. So, I think that's really where my head's at, is like, if you're feeling lost, set your intention, figure out where you want to go or what the future might look like and where the gap is between what things are like now. Because that's the journey I've been on. And as much as I sometimes despise it, it's ultimately leading me to a much happier and better version of myself.
I really like that, because I think our goals might change, but if we have our intention set, we'll always be heading to that North Star, right? Yeah. So thank you so much, Zach, for being here today. Thank you for sharing your story, and you clearly are a unicorn in your industry and people development. And I love the fact that you really take that both words, the words people and the word development, very seriously in your profession, right? It's not a quick fix. It's a developmental process. So thank you so much for sharing. And for our audience, thank you for being here. Stay curious, stay creative, and be a unicorn in your industry. And we'll see you next month. And we actually have, we know who our next guest is going to be. It's going to be Ari Raz, the CEO of the Coconut Cult. So again, thank you for being here, Zach. And we will see you next month.